Hi, it's Israel Anderson, and welcome to another Table Talk. We have been going through the Exodus story and seeing really clearly that Yahweh of the Exodus is totally eviscerated by Jesus, Yeshua, in the Gospels. We looked at Matthew 7, we looked at Luke 11, we're about to start looking at Luke 4. Oh, I want to show you that actually. I've been working on this study called Temptation for a while, and it's all here. You can see it's pretty big. So this study is going to look at Luke 4. Luke 4 verses 1 through 13, and then we've got Luke 11 verses 1 through 13. That's interesting. I always find interesting things like that. There's no chapters, there's no verse numbers in the real text, in the Hebrew and Greek manuscripts. There's nothing like that. This was all added later. But it's interesting how you get like Hosea 13 and Revelation 13, and then we've got Luke 4, 1 through 13, and now Luke 11, 1 through 13. And we're going to get into the temptation. Somebody brought this up, actually, a few months ago. And somebody who's been, who backed out of a debate, actually. I won't name him. I don't want to embarrass him, but I know he'll watch this video, so he'll know who I'm talking about. He said he would do a space with me on Twitter, and then he backed out, Twitter. And he used Jesus quoting Yahweh, quoting the law to the devil in Luke 4 as an example of, trying to say, Jesus cannot be saying Yahweh is the devil because here he is quoting Yahweh's own words. Sometimes you do quote someone's words back to them, don't you? So we're going to get stuck into this very soon. Thanks to Caleb for the awesome AI art here. It's great what you can do now with AI. But the temptation is not an argument against what I'm talking about. It's one of the strongest arguments for what I'm talking about. And we will get into that later. We have so much to go through, as you can see. So let's dive back in here. And we're going to start looking today at, we went through some of these different passages, but now we're going to look at these topically. Like, for instance, responsibility. We're going to look at, Yahweh is responsible for all these Hebrews, right? I mean, he's gone to the Hebrews in Egypt and said, I'm going to take you to this wonderful promised land. And based on that, they decided to pack up their lives and go with Yahweh. Right? And we look at these numbers, about 2.5 million people left Egypt, and we arrive at that number, as we've said a few times, by extrapolating the number that it gives us in the text of 600,000 fighting-aged men. Okay? And so that's a very conservative extrapolation of 2.5 million. Other scholars say 5 million, 7 million, 9 million. But we'll play it safe with 2.5 million. Now, pop quiz. If you've watched previous videos, you know the answer to this one. How many people that left Egypt eventually made it to the promised land? Do you know the answer to that? 2 people. Now, one of the most common rebuttals when I say that is, no, lots of people left. They were carrying the ark in. I mean, there was all the stuff. I mean, there was lots of people. What are you talking about? It wasn't just 2. All those other people were born along the way. When we're talking about the people that left Egypt, how many of those people, of those 2.5 million people that left Egypt, how many eventually arrived in the promised land? 2. Joshua and Caleb. Not very many. That's a broken promise by anybody's standard. If I was to get a $2.5 million loan from the bank and I went back to the bank 40 years later and said, well, here's $2, they would call the police. They'd call the FBI. Like, what are you talking about? You haven't repaid your loan. Oh, of course, $2. What do you mean? That's the argument some Christians make. 2 people entered the promised land. How can you say Yahweh didn't keep his promise? Yeah. Okay. Go try that with your bank. See how it works out. All right. So we're going to look at responsibility, and we're going to look at how to request food today. And just before we get in there, thank you so much to all the Founders Club members. And we just added another perk to the Founders Club. So quarterly, 15-minute phone calls. I love this. I love being able to talk on the phone with the people that are financially supporting me. Thank you so much. So we just added that, and we haven't done any of those yet. So if you're watching this and you're going, I haven't had a phone call with you. No one has yet, but we're going to organize all of that, as we go on from now. And this is exciting to me because, I was wondering, could I do this? I'm not going to be able to do this on the YouTube advertising revenue. By the way, if you want to know what that is, it's under $150 per month. So it's not a whole lot of money. The only way I can do this is people like you that say, yeah, I agree with what you're doing, and I want to help what you're doing, and here's some cash. And I appreciate that very much. So we've got some new people. So we've got some new figures. It's $25 a month minimum, but there's other options there if you want to. You can do 50, 75, 100. I don't know if there's other options there as well. I had somebody else set it up for me. But if you have any issues, just, send me an email or something. Trying to get to minimum wage, $2,300 a month. We're now at $1,075. We're almost at the halfway mark, which is mind-blowing. It's just totally mind-blowing. So these are our latest subscribers. So thank you very, very much to all of these incredible people. A. Laird, M. Bouts, R. Lawson, D. Fisher, K. Castro, and K. Williams. Thank you. I mean, it's a big deal, and without you, I could not do this. So thank you very, very much. Right, let's get into the study. So I know that's what you all want. And I tell you, I've been working hard, and we're going to get to that temptation study, and that is going to really ruffle some feathers. But so have the other studies, haven't they? What's interesting is we put out the study on Luke 11, 1 through 13, where we have the Lord's Prayer, and then we have those 2 stories. The man that knocks on his friend's door and says, hey, I've got a friend on a journey who just came by, and I need some bread. Would you please get up and give me some bread? And we'll talk about that actually right here. And then there's the other story as well. We'll get into it right here. So we'll cover that. But you know what's interesting? No one has been able to dispute that. Nobody, not one single solitary individual, has been able to come forward and say, oh, no, you got this wrong because you forgot this or that, or here's this context that reframes what you're saying, and you made a big mistake, and here's why, and nothing. It's been 3 weeks now since I put that study out. Nothing. I think we're on pretty solid ground. Trying to get people to debate. The only people that want to debate are, zealous laymen that don't have the biblical background to really warrant debating them. And the people that do, they know what they see, that's for sure, but they don't want to talk about it. It's interesting. So Yahweh versus Jesus. We're going to look here at a whole list of things. We're just looking at 2 today, but we are going to have, I think this is about 24 individual points that we're going to look at here. And remember, this is just showing you the preliminaries before we turn this into a proper study that will be called 2 Snakes in a Desert. All right? So let's get into this. Responsibility. Yahweh had total and complete responsibility for every single one of these people, the Hebrews. But he did not feed them. He knew their need and did nothing about it. So we're going to read here in Exodus 16, 1 through 3. When they journeyed from Elim, the entire company of Israelites came to the wilderness of Sin. And there's no connection here between the wilderness of Sin and the concept of sin, okay? Just in case somebody has a question like that. Which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after their exodus from the land of Egypt. All right? Just starting out. The dates are here. Okay? This is the 15th day of the second month. So we're about 45 days after they've left Egypt. The entire company of Israelites murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Let me just silence that device. Otherwise, it's going to go ching-ching several times. Okay. The entire company of Israelites murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Now, there's some Christians, they make this argument. That's why Yahweh, well, they won't say murdered, but that's what it is. That's why Yahweh killed them, because they were grumbling and complaining. And some will even say, look, they admit it and they asked for forgiveness. They apologized. They said, we've sinned against you. We shouldn't have been grumbling and complaining. See? If your child grumbled and complained for food, would you murder him? No. No. The Israelites said to them, Moses and Aaron, if only we had died by the hand of Yahweh in the land of Egypt, where we sat by the pots of meat, where we ate bread to the full, for you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. They knew what was going on. This is exactly what Yahweh intended to do. Yahweh lied to them. He said, I'm taking you to this promised land. Could you imagine? You're God, and you come to 2.5 million people, and you persuade them, I'm going to take you to a much better place. You don't have to put up with the harsh treatment from the Egyptians anymore. Of course, during the whole journey, they're just like, can't we just go back to Egypt? So it can't have been that bad. And they start marching away from Egypt, and they're 45 days in, and they're pulling their hair out like, would you lead us here to die? Well, yes, that's the point. We want your offspring. So reproduce quickly. Survival of the fittest test. All of you who are fit, reproduce, because we want your sons so we can build an army. That's Yahweh's modus operandi here. That's what he's trying to do. That's all he's trying to do. So he has responsibility for all these people, but he does not provide for them. Now, the Christian response here is, of course, what are you talking about? He provided them with manna. Oh, manna? Yeah. You remember Keith Green? I love Keith Green. I have some kind of connections in ministry to people that mentored Keith Green, and I've got a lot of interesting connections there. He has a song about, oh, you want to go back to Egypt where it's safe and secure. And, he makes fun of the manna there. I love it. But could you imagine this like powdery stuff? They don't know they've never seen it before. They don't know what to do with it. They're learning how to turn it into food, something edible. But they're asking for fish. They're asking for bread. They're asking for leeks. They're asking for pots of meat. No, they didn't get any of that. Not from Yahweh. It's interesting. So he has full responsibility for these people. He doesn't care. Doesn't care at all. Let's compare that to Jesus. Jesus needs no request. He sees the needs of his people. He sees the obvious needs and provides food in abundance. And we're going to read John 6, 10 through 13 here. Jesus said, have the people sit down. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Now, again, we can extrapolate the numbers here. Let's say 7,500. There's 5,000 men. Okay, they're a little bit misogynist back then. So they're only counting the men, not the women, the children. So pretty safe. About 7,500 people, actually. They're here and they're hungry. Then Jesus took the loaves, because they had found some loaves, right? You can read this in context. Go to John 6 and read the whole story here. This is just a few verses here. You'll see that there's a prior conversation, and they found a young man that had some bread and fish with him, but it wasn't much. Well, certainly not enough to feed even the disciples. let alone 7,500 people. Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed the bread to those who were seated. He then did the same with the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were all satisfied, Jesus said to his disciples, "Gather up the broken pieces that are left over so that nothing is wasted." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with broken pieces from the 5 barley loaves left over by the people who had eaten. What's interesting here is the comparison. There's obviously such a direct comparison here between the Exodus and Jesus 2,000 years ago. In the Exodus, they got manna. It went off except on Fridays. And so they couldn't keep it, right? There was no point in keeping up the leftovers. Get rid of the leftovers because tomorrow that's going to be full of maggots. Not here. But what I find interesting is that Jesus provides total abundance. Nobody went hungry. Everybody was satisfied. And it's not wasted. There is abundance, but there's no waste. Everything is accounted for. It's like if you've ever done catering for a large number of people, you might read the story and go, this guy had some experience with catering. Like he really knew what he was doing. But the main element here is that Yahweh did not take responsibility for the people that he took out of Egypt, right? He went to these people and he persuaded them to leave everything behind. Jesus notices that there are people following him. He didn't ask them to follow him. They have been listening and they go, we want to go where this guy's going. We want to listen to what he has to say. There's a difference there too. Yahweh really had to persuade these people. Jesus just like, it's kind of a lot of people here. Better feed them. I have responsibility for them, right? Would have been pretty easy to say, man, I don't know. One of the disciples actually suggested, why don't you tell these people to bus off into the surrounding villages so they can buy some food? And Jesus is like, nah, I got a better idea. Let's feed them. That's our Lord. That's Jesus. He takes care of our needs. So responsibility. Then we got how to request food. And this ties in. Now, this is another argument. I kind of raised it before where the Christians will say, oh, look, I've got it right here. Some argue the Hebrews asked for food from Yahweh the wrong way. That's their excuse for Yahweh murdering 2.5 million, 2,499,998 people in the desert. Numbers 11, 4-6. Now the mixed multitude who were among them craved more desirable foods. People will pick on this. In fact, people will isolate here the mixed multitude. What does this mean? The mixed multitude? The mixed multitude is talking about the non-Hebrews, the non-Israelites that came with the Hebrews. A lot of Egyptians have said, yeah, we're coming with you. But that doesn't work because, let's read. Now the mixed multitude who were among them craved more desirable foods, and so the Israelites wept again and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt. I've had quite a number of people. It's kind of strange, actually. I don't really understand what's going on here. Message me through various means and say, you are a liar. They never asked for fish specifically. Okay, Numbers 11, I think it's verse 5. Yes, they did. Specifically, fish. In fact, they asked for meat several times, and the only meat they ever categorically specifically asked for, was fish. Okay? They did ask for fish. I don't know why that's so confusing. That people have come to me and said they never asked for fish. Yes, they did. Yep. Don't know how that, several people, it's kind of weird. If only we have meat to eat, we remember the fish we used to eat freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we are dried up, and there is nothing at all before us except this manna. Wow. They weren't real happy with the manna. In recent days, some people have been forwarding me some stuff about the manna. I find it very interesting that some people speculate they know what that manna is. And we'll talk about that more in the future. But let's look now at what Jesus did. Jesus tells us, excuse me, that when you need food, it's okay to be a little demanding. Luke 11, 5 through 8. Suppose one of you has a friend, and you go to him at midnight and say to him, "Friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread because a friend of mine has stopped here while on a journey," like in Exodus, "and I have nothing to set before him." Then he will reply from inside, "Do not bother me. The door is already shut. My children and I are in bed. I cannot get up and give you anything." Then Jesus says, "I tell you, even though the man inside will not get up and give him anything because he is his friend, yet because of the first man's sheer persistence, he will get up and give him whatever he needs." This is Jesus directly addressing Yahweh's refusal and Yahweh getting upset at the Hebrews demanding food. This is a really interesting story. Jesus is directly addressing this event in the Exodus and saying it's okay to be demanding for food. And if you are, you won't be murdered in the desert. You'll be rewarded for it. You know, the more that we look at the differences between Yahweh's treatment of the Hebrews during the Exodus and the way Jesus treated people when he was here 2,000 years ago. You know, this argument that is becoming more and more popular thanks to Mormon influence today, people using John 8:58, where the Lord said before Abraham was, and in English translations, we're translating it as "I am." It should not be translated that way. It's caused so much confusion. What Jesus is saying there is, before Abraham existed, I exist, right? But these biased Christians want to turn it into "I am" so they can say that he's saying he's Yahweh, which is interesting because just like 14 verses earlier in verse 44, Jesus describes Yahweh as the devil, right? The lying murderer from the beginning. Lied to 2.5 million people about taking them to a promised land. You can't get around that. That's a lie. Yahweh lied to the Hebrews. Yahweh murdered 2.5 million of them in the desert. And it didn't start there. It started right back in the garden where Yahweh lied to Adam and Eve about the consequences of eating the fruit. He murdered them by evicting them from the garden that contained the fruit of the tree of life. He is the lying murderer from the beginning, from the Genesis. That's John 8:44. No matter how we slice it and dice it, we see Jesus making this comparison: Yahweh bad, me and my Father good. Okay? And if you want to argue that Jesus is Yahweh, which has not been a mainstream historical position in the body, now it's becoming a lot more popular because Mormons believe that. Mormons believe Yahweh is Jesus. And they're wrong, like they are on so many things. We have a lot more to discover. I've got in this more box here, we have just a stupid amount more to go through, and we will. And as soon as I'm done with this temptation study, we will release that and we'll come back to these other things. I I dragged my feet on putting a video out for a while because I wanted to get this out. And then I realized the more I dug into it, there was so much there. This happens often. There's so much there that it requires a lot more effort than just throwing it up onto the screen for you. So thank you very much for being here today. Appreciate you all very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching this video, and find somebody that you could share this with. People are now sharing my content everywhere. I love it. Thank you so very much. Lift him up. And one way that we can do that is by getting the truth about Jesus and Yahweh out there. A lot of Christians, a lot of atheists, a lot of non-believers don't want to have anything to do with Jesus or Christianity because they see Yahweh in the Old Testament. They go, yeah, I'm not subscribing to that. They don't have to. It was a case of mistaken identity. We can let go of all the excuses and justifications we've been using for why Yahweh behaved the way he did in the Old Testament. He's not God. He is Satan, the devil. Jesus said so over and over and over again. And this new talk, Temptation, will also demonstrate that. All right? Have a wonderful evening. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.